Gary Waterman, a former UK police constable. We're going to be looking quickly at cell towers and why in the circumstances you can legally disable this technology to save your family. Now, any level of electromagnetic radiation is harmful to biological material, including humans. Now, they've used criminal fraudulent entity companies that I'm going to prove to you now, which is deliberate so that they can cause this harm to you, according to all of the evidence I have. And here's some photographs of a cell tower that I recently attended, and you can see I've just highlighted there's a sticker on the box outside of the perimeter, and on that sticker it says that this company, Orange PCS Ltd, manages the site there in relation to that cell tower. Well, that company does not exist at all on Companies House, so there is no management legally. This is deliberate fraud. They know exactly what they're doing, and this is why they've done it. But let's presume that this company does exist somewhere. Now, when you search it, Orange PLC Ltd Limited, and you put the word Companies House on Google, afterwards it comes up with Orange Personal Communications Services Limited, which is different. So therefore, the company still doesn't exist. But let's presume this company is the one that manages this cell tower. It's criminal and fraudulent, because on the incorporation document, which you'll find in the filing history, you can see Swift Incorporations Limited, and further down, Jordans and Sons Limited. This is very important in relation to the evidence that's been acquired for the last 3 years, because Jordans and Sons Limited is a criminal fraudulent entity company. And in fact, these two companies are the same two companies that started Exbourne Manor Freehold Limited, where all of this evidence was exposed from, the links to the Flemings, and where I was removed for refusing to file forged bank documents whilst a director of that company. And I'm going to explain why this is criminal now in relation to this cell tower and fraudulent, and why you can disable it. Because Vistra Limited on Companies House here had an original name of Jordans and Sons Limited, which is the same company. Okay, here go back to the filing history of the first company, Jordans and Sons Limited. So we know it's exactly the same company. Now notice there are no other company names registered here. You've got Jordans and Sons Limited, Jordans Limited, and then at the top you've got Vistra Limited here. Now if you go into the filing history of that company, you will see another name that has been hidden. Hammerplag Limited. This is on the important incorporation document, and that's important because that is when the company is registered. And if a company is not legally and lawfully registered, it's criminal and fraudulent, and it should never have been allowed to trade. And this is deliberate by our governments who control this register. So therefore they are deliberately allowing the harm to be caused to humanity via these cell towers by the forgery through the connections that are being made. And just to show you again, here's Hammerplag Limited on the incorporation document, okay, which is attached to the same record, but it is not registered here. But not only is it not registered, they have forged the register because the dates match up with here. Okay, they've had that document, they've attached it to the register, they've had the mens rea. Okay, in crime, you need mens rea and actus rea. So the mental capacity to know what information they have and what they need to do with it, i.e. transfer it to the register. And then they've actively, which is the actus rea, carried that out and forged the register. And instead of putting Hammerplag Limited, they've put Jordan and Sons Limited. They've committed the crime, because that then means that everyone else, or anything, involving any companies where that have that company on, are exposed to risk, whether it be financial or, as we're talking about here, physical or psychological harm from technology. And the illegality continues through. So any company that uses this company on it is also fraudulent and criminal, because every element of the incorporation document has to be legal and lawful, and it's not. Which means this company that we were looking at the top is also non-existent legally. It's fraudulent and criminal. So the cell towers can be disabled in relation to that element of things. And this supports why the Terrorism Act and the Criminal Damage Act are not applicable with you disabling it. So let's look at the Terrorism Act here. It was created in 2000, no surprise, the year before the World Trade Center disaster. And the Terrorism Act 2000 is the first of a number of general terrorism acts passed by the Parliament of the United Kingdom. And we're looking at all the acts on the right, and you can see here, now this is recently taken, so this is up-to-date legislation. And you can see on the first part of the act, it says, in this act, terrorism means the use or threat of action where A, the action falls within subsection 2. But B, the use of threat is designed to influence the government or international governmental organisations, or to intimidate the public or a section of the public. And the use or threat is made for the purpose of advancing political, religious, racial, or ideological causes. Well, none of that is obviously applicable. None of that. Because you are disabling them to save your children and your families, and nobody else is doing anything to prevent it. Plus, they have used deliberate fraud and crime, which supports you doing what you're doing, to show that they know the harm that they are going to cause or attempting to cause to people. So it's very good evidence. And this means that none of the Terrorism Act moving forward is applicable in relation to this situation. Now, Mark Steele, many of you may know, has been trying to claim that the cell towers and ULEZ cameras are a weapons system, imminently there to remove most of humanity, and yet he is not advising people to disable the cell towers. Okay? In fact, he's acting as a delay. This explains why he's linked into the same international fraud, the same criminal companies, and why he turned on me when I exposed him. Prior to this, peace officer Rob the Ratcatcher had suggested he was going to arrange with Mark Steele to be with me when I was going to disable a cell tower. But they were not willing to disable the cell tower themselves, and they are linked to the same international government fraud. Now, Rob the Ratcatcher is also heavily implicated in this. Okay, this is why he turned on me when I asked him to expose the fraud, and I actually exposed him. He was a driving instructor, according to the research I've got, stopped being a driving instructor in 2023 it was, and became involved with the peace officers. Sorry, not peacekeepers, peace officers. And there's research and evidence I've got linking him to the same international government fraud, which I haven't had chance to publicise yet. So, okay, so the Terrorism Act is not applicable. And ideological causes is not applicable on that, because it's based on or relating to a system of ideas or ideals, especially concerning economic or political theory and policy. Well, it's not, is it? This is based on clear evidence of criminal fraudulent companies and a threat to your children and families. Let's look at the Criminal Damage Act. You can see here it came out in 1971. No surprise, no coincidence. That is the year of the World Economic Forum, who's massively implicated in this, okay? And that, which is all about deception against humanity and very serious crimes. And within the first part of the Act, it says a person who without lawful excuse. This is important, all right? Because if there is a lawful excuse, which we're going to come to in a minute, then the rest of this is not applicable, what we're reading. Reading on, it says, destroys or damages any property belonging to another. This is important. Remember, we've got criminal fraudulent companies that are putting these towers up that own them, supposedly. But if they're illegal fraudulent criminal entity companies that should never have been able to trade, there is no legal owner, everybody. So again, this is not applicable moving forward. But let's just say they are. Let's just say they are legitimate companies, and that doesn't apply, and you don't have a lawful excuse. It says a person who without lawful excuse destroys or damages any property, whether belonging to himself or another, intending to destroy or damage any property, or being reckless as to whether any property will be destroyed or damaged. Intending by the destruction or damage to endanger... A person who, without lawful excuse, destroys or damages any property, whether belonging to himself or another, intending to destroy or damage any property, or being reckless as to whether any property will be destroyed or damaged, and intending by the destruction or damage to endanger the life of another, or by recklessly as to whether the life of another would be thereby endangered, shall be guilty of an offence. So without the legal excuse, lawful excuse, you've also got whether what your intention is behind that and whether you're being reckless. So if you're not, and your intention is to save the children, and you're taking all measures that you can in these circumstances to prevent an endanger to life, then you are covered by the defences. That's even if you haven't got a lawful excuse, but we're going to come to that in a minute. At the bottom, you can see it says, an offence committed under this section by destroying or damaging property by fire shall be charged as arson. So let's look at without lawful excuse, which is section 5 of the Act. And that says at the top here, this section applies to any offence under section 1.1, which we've just been looking at above, and any offence under section 2 or 3 above, other than one involving a threat by the person charged to destroy or damage property in a way which he knows is likely to endanger the life. Likely. So you have to know and believe it's likely that someone their life would be endangered. So if you take certain measures, i.e. putting a sign up afterwards or calling the fire brigade or whatever else it is you need to do to prevent that endanger of life, then you're showing that it's not likely that life is endangered, depending on how you're going to disable them. Reading on the life of another, or involving an intent by the person charged to use or cause to permit the use of something in his custody or under his control as to destroy or damage property. Now, it says in this section here, a person charged with an offence to which this section applies shall, whether or not he would be treated for the purposes of the Act as having a lawful excuse, apart from the subsection, be treated for those purposes as having a lawful excuse, if A, at the time of the act or acts alleged to constitute the offence, he believed that the person or persons of whom he believed to be entitled to consent, which would be the owner of the property, generally, of which there isn't because of the forgery, okay, but let's just say they were legal or lawful, the companies, let's just say they were, and they believed that that person would have consented to the damage or destruction in question and consented to it, or would have so consented to it if he or they had known of the destruction or damage and its circumstances. So in other words, if these companies were lawful companies, which they're not, you would have an honest held belief that surely they wouldn't put this technology here to damage my children and my family. Therefore, they'd be happy with me to disable it. Okay, if they knew what they were doing, which of course they do, by being involved in implementing this technology, then they are conspiring to commit at the very least GBH, but potentially murder of you and your family. So you then have a separate defence of self-defence in relation to this. But you can see, now you'd have an honest held belief that they would allow you to disable it had they known that this electromagnetic radiation is harmful, which it is at any level, to biological material. You can go and research that. Reading further down, if I can move the document, it says, if he destroyed or damaged or threatened or destroy or damage the property in question, or in the case of a charge of an offence under section 3 above, intended to use or cause or permit to use of something to destroy or damage in order to protect property, another defence. Now, what is property? Well, obviously, it's anything you own, but it also includes pets, okay, and dogs, which have biological material, which is then harmful, can be caused harm from the electromagnetic radiation. So again, you have a defence. And at the very bottom here, this is important. It says, for the purposes of this section, this is under number 3, for the purposes of this section, it is immaterial whether a belief is justified or not, if it's honestly held. Now, this is so broad. So if you have an honest held belief in what I'm telling you, then there you go. You can disable this technology. It's so overwhelmingly obvious the harm that this can cause. Many people now are showing the levels being way above the safe level. And by us allowing them to remain, these sinister, evil people behind all of this believe that we are consenting to our own destruction. That's how evil this is, everybody. Okay? That's how they believe this is the case. But that's obviously completely unjustified and unfair. They're not saying on all mainstream media with poster up everywhere saying we're trying to kill you. In which case, then, okay, maybe they could say, well, we've told you. Okay, but they haven't. But in their sick minds, because they are sick, okay? They've been misguided, and I don't mean this offensively. They've been misguided by a cult system, okay? And they're also going to be victimized by this. But they believe that we're consenting to all of this. And we're paying for it with our own money in the taxation system, everybody. Let that just sink in. So everybody, you need to go and disable these towers. I'm going to be trying to disable one myself soon. I'm just trying to figure out how to do it. It's a bit more difficult because I'm by myself, but I will be thinking of various things that I can do to ensure that it doesn't endanger people's lives, and trying to make sure I don't endanger my own life at the same time. So please, everybody, go and disable them. Get some advice if need be from an electrician, so it can be done safely. And let's stop this satanic agenda right now, please. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.